All right, thank you. It is fantastic to see so many people out here today. I just want to appreciate everyone for coming out this morning. Welcome back to another episode of Who Wants to Be a Regulator? The IoT security game show. Applause. Now, our longtime viewers will know that this show is about better understanding the complexity of IoT security and the fact that real truths about solutions. Longtime viewers will also be surprised since this is the first episode that we've ever done, but we're appreciated that you're here for it. Just to reiterate the reminder, please keep phones in silent mode. Please keep arms, legs, and any external genitalia inside the talk, and we're going to go forward. Today's talk is going to be about exploring some of the nuances and complexities inside IoT security. We're going to be voraciously debunking myths and flawed, overly simplistic proposals, and we're going to be trying not to make fun of the game show host too much. Yes. Okay. There. So, in this game, the points don't mean anything. The jokes are going to be dirty, but the stakes cannot be higher. And we have fantastic participants today. I'm going to introduce the panel now. After we play our game, there's going to be a lot of time for you guys to come forward with your own questions and ideas. Remember, there are no dumb questions, but there are lots of dumb ideas. So let's get them out on the table today. Contestant number 1 is Jen Ellis. Every game show needs a very swearing, gender-confused Brit. Jen is Vice President of Rapid7. She's been trying to bang through the... She's been trying to bang it through the thick skull of the security community. That communications is important. She's also been trying to bang through other things, which is how she gets into further trouble. She works very hard to herd all the cats. And are you bastards grateful for all the work she's done? No. There you go. Contestant number 2 is your favorite ex-regulator, Whitney Merrill. Whitney is a lawyer, but that's okay, because some of my best friends also know lawyers. And she's currently the Privacy and Consumer Protection Counsel for EA, but she has ample experience in the Washington policy scene. She's got a background in engineering, and she spent some time in the FTC as an actual regulator, so can tell us how not to do it. And then finally, and our final contestant today is Wendy Knox Everette. She's a regulator. She's not a regulator. She is a lawyer, but we're going to forgive her for that one. She used to be a real engineer, and then for some reason she went to law school, realized the error of her ways, and went back into engineering. She's one of the people who's been on the forefront of thinking about how security and the law absolutely have to work together, sometimes, just smushing them really hard. So, you all ready to play our game today? Oh, come on, yeah? All right. Now, just as a slight programming note, we ordered buzzers to be shipped so that the panelists would all have buzzers because it's the proper game show. Unfortunately, they sent us rubber birds, so we have buzzards instead. We have buzzards.
Yeah, we got it.
So, we're going to be asking our panelists to make strange noises, but Wendy, not that strange. All right, we'll start off with an easy one. A survey of consumers shows that the number 1 feature people want in a smart home device is... Wendy.
Lots and lots and lots of blinky LEDs.
We do see, it's true, shiny lights. We've got some support in the audience.
Beep, bloop, blop, blop.
You can come in for the steal.
Ease of use, cool apps, things that make their old, boring devices seem fun and interesting.
That is, oh, yes, Jen.
I think that I speak for many of you, I think
Oh. All right, for the record, some of you applauded to that one on camera.
We have your names.
And very quickly, can we hear Jen's mic? Yes, we cannot. It's the mustache. Given that this is being recorded, we may want to
Is it on?
check that it's on. Turns out...
IoT is really hard.
you generally... Ooh, hello. I found the button, everybody.
All
At least
right.
I can say that.
Question number 2.
There we go. I thought the women at least would laugh at that.
Question number 2. Why on earth are we connecting things like light bulbs? Anyone have an answer for that one? Whitney.
I really have no idea, but I'll be honest. I bought my first IoT device while taking a security class. We were talking about threat models of IoT, and I thought, wow, that sounds really cool. I really want light bulbs that turn on without me having to do anything and shut off and also turn blue.
Yes, Wendy.
I mean, I don't know, but I have something that lights up even better than some Alexa-controlled light bulbs. That is a small dumpster, my people.
There we go. So, yes, for those of you watching along at
If
home.
we weren't, trying not to kill all of you.
Excellent. 6 points extra for bringing a prop. So we are seeing this connected technology everywhere. What's driving this rapid pace of adoption? Yes, Wendy.
Bluetooth is really just like bacon. You want more of it. You want it everywhere. It makes everything, even fridges, even better.
It's true. It is delicious. Very salty.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yes, the dinosaur at the end.
I think it's really good marketing. People are driven by consumerism. They want what's cool and new, and they don't care if their old fridge is perfectly good. If their new fridge is connected to the internet and has a pretty screen, they'll be interested in buying it. And so I think people are suckers.
Ding dong!
We are trying to steal the point.
Wait, it's more than just consumerism. There's more to it than this. We're not just talking about consumer devices, we're also talking about industrial control systems. Don't watch the moustache waggling, it's distracting. We're talking about lots of enterprise stuff, and there's lots of really good reasons for doing some of this. Like there's convenience, there's productivity, there's efficiency, there's safety in some cases, there's health. There's loads of good reasons to have IoT, not just, your fridge telling you when you're out of milk.
And Bluetooth bacon.
And Bluetooth bacon.
It
So
is
I'm
delicious.
convinced. This stuff sounds really useful. We're going to connect everything. Are there any challenges that we should be focused or concerned about in this, connecting all the things? Anything that we should be worried about?
I am kind of running out of places to plug things in. That's been a bit of a burden for me.
This is a challenge. Keeping all the battery charges, it's tricky.
My electricity bill's gone way up.
I don't know.
No one else has any thoughts? Like maybe.
Yes, Wendy.
The hackers get into all the things in all the places in our home right now.
You
hackers.
bastards. You bastards.
Hackers.
This is why we can't have nice things. It's clearly all your fault. But why is security of these devices something that we should care about? Why is this important?
Well, I think why is it important? Well, there are privacy and security concerns, and ultimately it reveals a lot of information about ourselves.
So I will add to that. I think there are 3 main reasons why IoT security matters and why it's different to the way that we think about security traditionally. So the first is, I think that when you're talking about IoT, you are bridging the divide between physical and virtual. So instead of just talking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, as we have traditionally talked about with security, now we're talking about the potential for physical harm. That's a pretty fundamental shift in terms of the stakes. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you are looking at just really, really massive, rapid adoption of IoT and connected devices. And that speed of adoption is massively increasing the opportunity for attackers. There's a much greater attack surface, and now it's penetrating into more areas of our lives. And the third thing is that these devices are being created using a lot of third-party systems. There's a lot of interconnectivity. And so the complexity of securing them has just massively increased. And so kind of trying to secure after the fact is, at best, incredibly challenging, and at worst, just redundant. And that's why we kind of really need to get ahead of it before the fact.
I want to know if the proliferation of really crappy IoT devices is the first stage of the rise of the robots.
I mean, I think almost
That is an
certainly
excellent
it is.
question.
Like,
I,
I
for
think-
one, welcome our new robot overlords, which takes us into our first commercial break. If you have a headache that's this big, run straight to your local drugstore and just shout, I can't fucking take it anymore. I've got a headache that's this big. That's right. We are sponsored today by Useless Outrage. Useless Outrage for when you won't know what to do and Twitter is down. Useless Outrage. All right, let's check in with the scores. We've got Jen with 17,
Woo! Come on.
Wendy with 93,
Oh,
Whitney with 7 3/4 plus I.
not losing.
Thank you. All right. And now it's time to play the children's favorite game, Can You Top This? So we're going to be asking our panel, who can come up with the biggest IoT security fail? Who wants to start the bidding?
Beep, boop, boop, bloop, boop, da, ba, do, da,
And Whitney, who's found her place in the script. Yes.
Hey, it's not.
I had
fault
to
you
think
went off.
about it. It's a tough question.
tough
There are
question.
so many bad fails. I had to think about it. I think all of the devices that failed, I wouldn't even say failed dumb, they just failed in crazy ways during the Dyn attack, including one thermostat that just kept rising the temperature of a home and they couldn't shut it off.
It's getting hot in here.
Alan, no.
Yes.
I think one concern that, is oftentimes unaddressed, except that the New York Times recently wrote about it, so kudos to them, is the rise of the use of home automation by abusers and other people who are controlling people who live with them and sort of gaslighting them by locking them out of lights, setting thermostats to do crazy things, the surveillance when there are lots of cameras in your home. People know where you are. The monitors in cars. My husband has more than once texted me and be like, hey, I saw you stopped at the grocery store on the way home. Can you pick up some milk? Because he can see on the phone where the car is. And like, he's awesome. He's just trying to help us out, but it's a little weird the first time it happens.
I like, those are great examples and everything, but I think the reality is that we have no clue today how far the fail goes or to what extent. For example, if you have a car crash, nobody is doing analysis right now to see whether there was any kind of tinkering, any outside involvement through any of the connectivity. Like, that's just not part of the diagnostic process right now, the forensics process. And I think that's probably true in healthcare. It's probably true in a lot of ways. So people could be using these technologies in nasty, scary ways that we theorize right now, and we wouldn't really know if it's happening in real life. And so we think it sounds kind of sci-fi, but we don't really know.
Can anyone really know IoT fail? But I don't know. And you say this stuff could be happening. How is this stuff really different from what we're seeing, on my home computers? No one patches their home computers, so why should we care about horrible security on connected devices?
Okay, so firstly, that is just blatantly, patently absurd. People should be patching their home computers. You shouldn't just accept it and be like, bullshit, whatever. Secondly, best estimates at the moment are that some ridiculous number, somewhere between 7 and 9 homes have a device that's part of a botnet, right? And if you think about IoT, so today, let's say that you have, 5 connected devices in your home, and one of them is part of a botnet in some way. And then let's say in 5 years' time you have 40 connected devices in your home because everything's more delicious with sweet, sweet Bluetooth. Then the amazing amount of potential for you to be part of a botnet and for that compute power to be available to the bad guys has just massively increased. And then you get situations where you've got bad guys with supercomputers constantly.
My coffee machine is a supercomputer.
Right.
Other confessions.
Wonk, bloop, bloop, da.
Yes, the buzzer on the end by the creative dinosaur.
I think, one of the big problems is that IoT is generally so new, and we better understand desktop systems. We have a user interface. People have been trained on how to work with them. I mean, it's not even perfect on the desktop system, but there's been time to develop it. And we're in a very early stages of IoT, and I think with the lack of user interface, people don't exactly know how to interact.
That's pretty good, sir. Yes, the buzzard in the middle.
So in users' homes, we now have all these computers and physical things that can move around our homes, that can interact with us. We got thermostats, we got lights, we got smart fridges who want some food poisoning due to a virus. We have smart robots rolling around who want someone to hack into their robot and trip them when they get up late at night. This intrusion into this physical really means that a lot more of our private information is exposed. It means that viruses and so forth are just malicious or negligent, crappy programming could actually injure us. So we have this much more of our stuff in what we consider to be a private, safe environment being captured, tracked, analyzed, marketed at us, then is exposed through our desktop computers and our mobile devices. And we all know there's an insane amount of information about us getting tracked through those areas. But it really is this bringing the software into a place where it could physically harm me. Like Microsoft Office can crash all day and it annoys me. And the only physical injury I'm gonna get is like me beating my head against the keyboard. When we have robots and we have cars, we have other things that might start breaking legs and so forth, it becomes a little bit slightly different.
Excellent. So that sound that you all totally just heard means it's time to play one of my favorite games, which is School a Mansplainer. Now, this is open.
However,
For
will
everyone.
we find one?
This is open for anyone on the panel. You can pick whatever answer you want to offer in here. Well, actually, if this is still so important, why don't we just stop selling these things? People really cared, they'd stop buying them. If this was important, they'd stop buying them. Does anyone want to school the mansplainer? Yes.
I will wave a buzzard for that one. Here's the thing. You might say we're crappy at judging risk, but we're actually all really, really good at judging risk. It's a really small risk for an individual to bring one of these things into their home. Like, yeah, your Roomba might trip you, but it's probably not going to do that. Security is really someone else's problem. All the folks who had their stuff hacked and died, they didn't necessarily have any problems. Like, maybe they got the same impact everybody else who didn't have the IoT devices. But, like, it's very rare for a consumer to be actually targeted.
Nonsense. It's bullshit. You don't have to be targeted. Like, that's the problem, is all of this stuff, there's like so many low-level attacks that are just designed to go across the internet and hit any device that's receptive, and we all know that, right? Like, we work in security. And so it's this fallacy that consumers have of like, I'm not gonna be a target. It's just nonsense. They just don't understand the ecosystem. And like, that's not on them. We haven't done a really good job of explaining that to them. We've like kind of, done this whole like, oh, security's complicated, you have to be as smart as us. And clearly, I'm not that smart. So I think that we have to do a better job of educating consumers on why it is relevant to them and how it can impact them.
Boop, chicka, chicka.
Oh, yeah.
How did she get a new buzzer?
I think one of the problems is IoT is everywhere. And in addition to enticing consumers to purchase, it's very difficult in some markets to actually find non-smart types of devices. Has anyone tried shopping for a non-smart television or trying to make a consumer choice where you're signaling to them that you don't want this feature, that you don't want something, but they're all competing with one another to get the newest, the best, they love saying it's now connected and smart, but is it really smart? I'm not sure.
Well, but my Bluetooth pure water filter on my faucet, like, it's smarter than me, knows how much water I'm drinking. It's kind of cool.
That is actually kind of cool.
It's going to be your boss in a couple of years.
But surely this only applies to like the great unwashed masses. We here in the security community, we wouldn't fall for something like that. We would only buy things that were locked down and secure. There's no product that we would say, it'll be okay, right?
Boom, dum, dum, dum.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm convinced that people continue to buy baby monitors despite the horror stories we read in Ars Technica and Wired, etc., explaining and showing actual attacks on innocent individuals. People are still buying smart baby monitors because ultimately, as a scared parent, you want to see your child 24/7, even if it's just laying there breathing. You want to check and see, is it still alive? And so in that risk model, it's baby death or weird, strange man or woman yells things over the baby monitor. And I think people are still purchasing them, and I think it's going to continue to be a big market.
For those of you interested in the service, Jen will come and just yell strange things at your house.
With accents. A range of accents. I have one word for you. Teledildonics.
Teledildonics.
All right, on the count of three, everyone say it with me. 1, 2, 3. Teledildonics. All right, you guys have convinced me. Teledildonics notwithstanding, we should just ban this. Why don't, we're talking about the government up here. Why don't we just ban all of this stuff? Burn it to the ground. Anyone have a response from the panel?
You can just ignore everything I said about the advantages earlier. Like, let's just ban it. I agree. That's a great idea. Let's ban it. I'm cool with that.
Yes, Whitney?
But America, I think people should have the freedom to choose and be able to make smart choices. And I think, if we start banning devices, we're going to lose the good with the bad. And I think there's an idea of freedom of choice. We shouldn't be over-regulating this space in a way that might hinder competition or hinder innovation.
Yeah, didn't we just
America!
Stuff is really useful. Like, you are prying my Roomba out of my cold, dead hands because I'm a working lady and my place ain't gonna get vacuumed unless I can tell Alexa to tell Roomba to vacuum.
All right, we've got cheers out for the working ladies in the audience. They like this answer. Fantastic. So if we're not gonna ban them, what can we do? Surely the government must be able to do something. We've got this risk from everything from toys to Toyotas. It's everywhere. What's a poor nation state to do with a legitimate monopoly on the use of force? Anyone have something what the government can do? Yes, Wendy.
They can, go establish a department of IoT. Like, you guys got lots and lots of agencies. Let's make one more. It's just totally just like when radios are becoming popular. We needed a regulator. They had to establish clear roles, set up some ownership rules and so forth. We got the FCC, pretty darn cool. We got the FAA, regulates pilots and stuff like that. Like, let's just go make one more department because I'm pretty sure you got space somewhere in DC to build another large building with extremely long hallways for poor small interns to get lost in and never be seen again for 3 weeks.
I was wondering what you were doing for those 3 weeks when you were working for me.
Playing with our Roomba.
Playing with a Roomba. Yes, do we have an answer that could beat build another death modernist building in Washington, D.C.?
One of the problems is, what is IoT, right? It's a very, very diverse term that encompasses a lot of things. And technically a phone and a computer are IoT because they're connected to the internet. So where do you start drawing the lines, and how do you start regulating amongst all of the regulators that have traditionally worked in the space? And so if you have the FDA regulating health devices, and you have the FTC doing some area of that for privacy stuff, at what point do they intersect? How do you start working them together? And so I think there are already quite a large range of agencies that already do this. And we have to establish a better framework to empower the regulators to understand the technologies and how they're changing. Because for all these years, these regulators have been, maybe it's just a refrigerator, right? It's not connected to the internet. Now you're giving a series of regulators who may not be familiar with the internet or security because they haven't had to deal with it before, the power to make decisions about IoT devices. And so I think there has to be a large cross-agency support, but I think adding another regulator would just add to the headache.
I love the idea that adding a new regulator, that's too much bureaucracy, but cross-agency integration, that always happens lightweight. But it's okay. We've got this notion that we're going to have a little easy use here, something more complex than that. But what is actually the difference between something in the home and something in a different context? Why can't we use the same regulatory model?
Well, I mean, consumer and enterprise is different when you're talking about this kind of technology. And the way that you think about, sorry, just remind me while I adjust my stomach. When you, distracted myself. When you think about, industrial control systems, and you think about anything that's really sort of in critical infrastructure, that's a vastly different thing to your fridge or your washing machine or Wendy's Roomba. in terms of how you protect them and how you manage them. And it's really critical that at the same time, we need to balance this sort of thing of you need to make sure that you're protecting the greater populace and you're thinking about risk and harm appropriately for that. So critical infrastructure is really important to look at. But you also need to make sure that you're supporting innovation, you're supporting the economy and the ability for entrepreneurship. These projects that get off the ground that have Kickstarters and all that kind of stuff, it's great. It's great for the economy. It's great for society. It drives innovation forward. And we don't want to create a regulatory burden on those kinds of organizations when they don't need it. It's not actually what the public wants or needs, and it just hurts us all. So there's a balance.
Ding dong, dum, bloop, bloop.
Yes.
I think, security has a cost, and ultimately that cost is passed down to consumers. And so when you start talking about adding security to consumer devices, at what point does the cost of security outweigh the benefits to the consumer? And so it's really a balancing act of risk models, and also providing the right set of tools available for consumer-facing devices to bring down that cost. Because as much as I love my Hue IoT light bulbs, I'm also thankful that I don't have to use 2FA every time I want to change them. Because if I did, I would stop using them. I would use the light switch. And then at that point, why buy the light bulbs? And then I don't get this wonderful, honestly, I have it for home security, right? When I'm on vacation here in Las Vegas, the lights go on and off. My cat feels like somebody is kind of home, maybe a ghost, but, it's a nice thing. And so if we build in too much cost, I'm not sure there's going to be a ton of benefit.
All right, so if we can't have the same regulatory model for everything, surely in the consumer goods space, there's one fairly straightforward regulatory model we can just impose on all of that. Yes?
I'd like to point out there's a slight difference between dongs versus dryers. Your dong is probably, no matter how Bluetoothy it is, going to set your house on fire.
I think that really depends on how you use it.
Or the lipo. I don't know. Boom.
All right, so we've talked a lot about balance and the need to appreciate this, but there are some government agencies out there that might be able to do something. For 17 points and a slice of fresh pineapple, name a government agency that can play a useful role here.
I would say the FTC.
I'm so shocked that you said the FTC.
Did she get disqualified?
So as a former FTCer myself, I think the FTC is uniquely positioned to deal with privacy and security issues across the board. Generally, they're consumer facing, so maybe not the industrial side of products, but the consumer facing products, they can have a really big impact in helping drive standards, helping provide insight into small actionable items that companies can use or do to move consumer privacy and security in a positive direction.
The FTC. One is that, can anyone share another government agency that might be useful?
Oh yeah, ding dong, me.
Yes, the ding dong.
So the FDA, anyone here from the FDA? No? Okay, so
The
anybody here
FDA
from
stands
the
for the
Food and Drug Administration, part of HHS, which stands for?
Health and Human Services.
Oh, you get a prize. Well done, Alan.
It's like I know.
It's like you work in the government. Okay, does anybody here work in the medical sector at all? Okay.
Oh,
okay.
fantastic.
All right, a little bit. So then you might be familiar with this. So the FDA, actually, I would say of all of the industry-specific regulators, is ahead of the game. They, a few years ago, got together a group of pretty knowledgeable security people, and they went into a sort of deep collaborative process with them to come up with a set of both pre-market and post-market guidance around how you think about medical device security. And so the idea is that they wanted to say to medical device manufacturers, okay, I'm just gonna keep going. They wanted to say to medical device manufacturers that if you receive notification of there being an issue with your product, it's great. It's great that somebody came and gave you notification of it, and you should work with that person, and you should figure out how to address this issue. And you're not going to have to go through reauthorization on your product just because you update it. Updating the product is good. And so they have this set of guidance. And there's been actually a pretty significant shift in the culture in the medical device manufacturing sector as a result of both that and the DMCA exemption for security research. The two kind of came at sort of approximately the same time. And they kind of created this lead effect where medical device manufacturers knew that they were going to get inbounds from researchers, hi Paul, and that they were, because now researchers are legally allowed to take these devices and test them in safe test environments. And they also knew that the FDA had basically said, this is a good thing and you should work in these ways. So there's been a shift of medical device manufacturers really trying to embrace this and create vulnerability disclosure and handling processes. There's definitely like a front-running set of companies and a tail on this, but like there has been a shift. And now the FTC is looking at how they can expand on this, and not FTC, the FDA is looking at how they can expand on this and go further. Conversely, there are other sector organizations, regulators, that are not as far ahead on this. Like, for example, NHTSA came out with some guidance that's meh. If anyone here is from NHTSA, let's talk. And don't hate me too much. But at least they're doing something and they're acknowledging that it's an issue and that they need to look at it, but they're just further behind in the journey. And I mean, the FAA is also further behind in the journey, but recognizes the thing. So like they're all trying to start down the path, but you know, as I think some of my competitors said earlier, you're dealing with sectors where they know their sector really deeply, but they don't know our sector. They don't know cybersecurity, and so like it's kind of on us to help them with this and figure out how to like help them get where they need to go.
Fantastic.
I'd like to buzz in with some people who might be aware that they're not aware of everything in the cybers. Anybody heard of this small department called like Commerce?
I hear that they suck.
Yeah, they employ some really
words
sketchy
hurt.
people.
Actually,
but they
to,
like
to any
really
of my
long
friends at
meetings.
Commerce who are not Allan, you're great and we love you.
We're just skeptical people in gold sequin jackets. Yeah,
Wendy, what kind of role can the Department of Commerce play in this?
you know, they're aware that they're not experts in this area, and they like to get lots of people together.
They can
come sit in a
convene, do they?
room.
Do they convene?
They convene, they think, they talk. Their interns take
do they get
pages and
multiple
pages
stakeholders
and
together?
pages and pages and pages of notes. And then, yeah, they get all these cool people together, and then they write these reports. It's kind of neat.
And then they put on a gold jacket and pretend
Yeah.
to do a TV show.
I have no idea what you're talking about. But first, just because of the title, I need to make it clear that the Department of Commerce is not a regulator, except for fish. I think we regulate fish. Are there security risks from fish?
Doesn't export control count as a form of
IoT.
regulation?
Wasn't going to go down the Boston road. Yes.
IoT fishing poles.
IoT fishing poles, it's true. All right, so we just somehow mentioned the U.S. Department of Commerce. They recently recently published a report that was in part drafted by a devastatingly handsome young man. And it talked about IoT security baselines, things that might span across this very broad and diverse IoT sector. For 3 points and a slice of Gouda cheese, can anyone name one of these baselines?
Ding dong!
Yes.
Is it no default credentials?
What's wrong with default credentials?
They're just a patently stupid idea because like they're default and people know them and they're in like the manuals and they're just a terrible idea. And they're even worse if they're hard coded. You need to have credentials that can be changed. And I am so irate about this that I'm tripping over my own moustache. It's an outrage.
Yes, Wendy.
They, really need to think about how they're storing their keys securely. Key management is really hard to channel Lee. But they hard code these keys on there. If they're even using them, a lot of these things like to do security updates over non-TLS connections. So let me just sort of hop on in and man the middle of your software update, and so now all the feeds from your cameras are going out into all the cybers for folks to intercept. This is kind of tricky. I realize the people who make my toaster are probably not super down with how to securely handle keys, but it's a cool practice they should start learning about.
Yes, there's an answer on the end for 3
Your
points,
buzz is
and she's
broken.
very excited about that. Gouda.
I think creating patching standards and making sure that devices are being made in a way that requires patching is really, really important, because it has to be something that's easy either for the consumer or done automatically. Because otherwise, no one's going to patch their device, even if they know it's part of a botnet, because they have to somehow get online, figure out how to patch it, figure it out. And I think there are a lot of consumers that will go, screw this, it's not affecting me, I don't really care. And so to have patching as part of the design of the IoT device is really, really vital. And that way we can, patch devices securely, as opposed to, I think it was the FBI who was just begging people to patch their devices. And I'm not sure how well that campaign went.
Remember, kids, a patching mechanism is a remote code exploit that you really hope that only the vendor can use. It's important to lock down your patching mechanism.
Do you want to talk about encryption backdoors?
Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, our panel is going to discover that there are countries outside the United States. But first, a word from our sponsor. Is a secure engineering process too hard for you? Does secure by design seem like a ridiculous concept? Then come to the good folks at Bolt-On Security. Why design it properly when you can bolt it on after? Bolt-On Security. When you've made a mistake and are just too lazy to fix it properly. All right. It is 100% guaranteed to protect you from everything that ThreatBot tells you about.
And you should check out their table in the main room. Get some stickers.
All right, so welcome back. It turns out that the United States is not the only country in the world. Comes as a surprise to some of us. I know.
You can't prove it.
Other agencies have also suggested some solutions. What are some of the ideas that we've heard from countries around the world that can really weigh in on this IoT security challenge?
Beep, beep.
Yes.
Security by design. There have been a ton of folks who have started sort of rejecting that bolt-on kind of idea, thinking about how you should do this starting from scratch and sort of not just, duct taping it on afterwards, but thinking about how to actually successfully build these things so they're not hack-proof, but they ain't going to join a botnet 5 seconds after you plug them in, because you've built authentication, built some patching, built all kinds of other stuff into it before you started building the whiz-bangy other fancy things onto them.
Ding dong.
Yes, Jen.
I may have some reason to talk about the UK government. They are doing some interesting things. They recently brought out a code of practice document. I'm going to be candid and tell you a lot of it's boring. But within it, there is an actual sort of section that is like the actual code of practice. And I think they have like 13 principles that they suggest that are well worth a look at. And they are sort of sensible things like you have to have a patching mechanism, you should use encryption, you should not have hard-coded default credentials, which we already understood is a thing I get around. So it's a lot of very logical things. I recommend checking it out. It was brought out by the Ministry of Harry Potter and Giggles, or something.
It's the Ministry of Trade, Culture, Fox Hunting, Waistcoats, and Sport.
Right, Harry Potter and Giggles. You should check it out and look at the code of practice. The other one I'll mention is the Dutch government has done a lot of work around coordinated disclosure, and they are pretty far ahead on that. They're, I think, actually no, because the UK just brought one out, but the Dutch government was the only government that had an actual published policy around coordinated disclosure, and it's well worth looking at. It's very good. It is in Dutch. It's small.
They've translated.
They've published.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I didn't know
love
if
the
that was
Dutch.
publicly
Love the
published, or
Dutch.
if they were just you can have it if you ask for it.
It's true.
I should have done the Dutch accent then, but I.
That would have gotten you an extra few points. Yes. Whitney.
Crypto. No, not blockchain.
Crypto means cryptozoology.
Crypto means cryptography. I think encrypting data at rest and in transit is some big steps that other governments are encouraging. I think the FTC, because they are great, also agrees that these are great things, but America.
So there's some work that's happening with our friends across the Atlantic in Brussels that have said that, no, we're going to have a certification model
Oh, God.
where devices will be certified as secure. Panel, what do we think about this?
Me.
Yes.
Okay. So what you need to understand about this is, firstly, the thing is like 800 pages long or something ridiculous. And secondly, in those 800 pages, it largely says nothing. It says, we're going to have certification for IoT devices, but we're not going to tell you which IoT devices or how to certify them, because we're the EU and we have member states and we want the member states to figure this out and come up with like ways of working it for themselves. So basically, it's 800 pages of like, we should do a thing, but we don't really know what the thing is, but we should definitely do it. And like that just opens us up to this world of confusion. The whole thing is like, hey, if you certify these devices, it's going to improve the ability to sell across borders. And that's a nice idea, but then when you go, hey, but you know, like Germany can figure out how they care about it, France can figure out how they care about it. I get it. In this room, there's a lot of Americans, you probably don't know this, but like there's more than one country in Europe. And we're quite
It's called
different.
France.
Right.
No.
Really? That's where you went? And we're quite different in how we think about things like privacy. So on the one hand, Germany really cares about privacy, and on the other hand, the UK is the surveillance state. We will watch you and we will judge you.
Sorry, is the UK
but we'll be
part
very
of
polite about it.
Europe? Should we too soon?
For like
Too
2
soon.
or 3 more months, and I will kill you for that.
Well, it depends on whether it's hard or soft.
Trump! Sorry. So anyway, my point being that if you're going to let countries figure this out for themselves within this like dynamic, you're going to get probably a range of ways that they figure it out. And then that whole like, oh, we have transparency and we have alignment and we're going to have great cross-border flow, that's probably not going to happen. And on top of that, are we creating new regulation? Are we using existing regulation? Like nobody really knows. But that's the thing that's happening right now, and you should check it out.
Boopy doo. It sounds like it might be the GDPR for IoT.
Nothing could go wrong with that.
At least GDPR is like a little bit more like prescriptive, and we're going to do this thing. It's confusing.
Correct. Yeah.
But it is a little bit more like, oh, we have a thing, it's this thing, it's the same across Europe, it's this thing.
Beep, beep.
Yes.
I mean, you're talking about certifying against a standard, but we don't know what the standard is. Like, are we going to get a standard for the standards?
Right. Like what? That's the problem.
It's standards all the way down.
Oh my.
I
And
thought
at the
that
bottom,
was
it's ISO
Regulator
documents.
dinosaurs all the way down.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about patching. What makes patching for IoT different? Like, we have patching for software. Why is this support model somehow different for IoT?
It's definitely broken.
DJ Dino lots?
Patching is hard. How many people here have patched something and then it broke a bunch of shit? Now imagine doing that with something that can, burn your house down or actually kill someone. And what if that patch isn't secure? And what if it's tampered with in the process? I think patching is very difficult, even on the devices we know a lot about. Also, encouraging people to patch is very difficult. One of the things that my company does that I really love / as a user appreciate is there is a countdown clock that I get of when my computer is going to restart to apply a bunch of patches. It's 12 hours, and it's like, in 12 hours, it's gonna force hard reset. And the reality is I'm in security. I know, I care, I wanna patch, but I lose all my browser tabs, and I don't wanna do X, Y, and Z, and I keep forgetting, and then all of a sudden I'm not patching and it's not secure. And so we need a way that basically is forcing patching, but in a secure, good way, and that's a hard problem.
Check.
Beep, 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 beep.
Yes, the beeper.
It turns out that like most stuff sold on the market these days, you can get some basic support for it for like 18 months. Like if it breaks, they'll swap it out. And so we've got this idea of warranties going on, right? But it's a little different when you got to software patch something, because you have the software running in there maybe for 5 years. 4 years down the road, after the company went bankrupt, who's going to patch the bug in the open source library that they stuck in there? Like, who's responsible at that point? That company might be long, long gone. These are much longer time ranges and involve much more effort than like, hey, you mail me that broken thing and I'm going to mail a replacement back to you.
Yes.
Also, it's not really clear when something is broken, when it's a software problem. So, in traditional devices, you can tell when your oven doesn't work and when it's being weird. You can tell when your refrigerator no longer keeps things cold and things start to smell. But if the software is slightly off, if it's spying on you a little bit more or sending data in a way that it shouldn't be, how do you know as the consumer, how does that feedback loop happen? How do you then tell the company it's happening? And this is a big privacy and security problem generally, is that most users don't know bad things are happening to them.
Fantastic. So let's take a quick time to check in on the scores. We see that Jen has won the water ski. Whitney has won the rotating platform that the water ski is on.
Woohoo!
And Wendy's in the lead with a puppy. So,
Puppies are cool. Can I get a dinosaur instead?
Is it a cyber puppy?
no.
Oh.
So, if we're not going to really push very hard on the regulator side of things, how can we nudge the market into place? What are some of the incentives that we might be able to use to sort of move towards a more secure space?
Beep, beep.
Yes, Wendy.
I see the invisible hand of the market, and it's out there. It's looming. It's stretching.
If it's
It's spreading its
invisible, how do you see it?
noodly appendages to correct all the buffer overflows and all the smart things. Oh, wait, sorry. That was just a flying spaghetti monster.
It's a common mistake, and it may be perched on your head at the moment. Yes, the dinosaur alarm clock.
I think we have to reward the good actors. I think instead of, starting, I think we have to start thinking about a culture of security. Vulnerability programs are really helpful, but if we reward the good actors, the people who are doing security right, who are caring about these devices, and as opposed to focusing on punishing the bad actors, we can create a ecosystem that focuses on creating good instead of punishing bad.
Ding dong.
All right, we have an answer from the massive ding dong.
And I've been sitting here the entire time playing with my clock and no one's commented. All right, so, like I said, I no longer am employed at Rapid 7. Okay, so I think that the reality is that consumers have a power and they don't necessarily appreciate that they have that power. And we may struggle today to really get the average individual consumer to really sort of exercise that power or to think about why they should want to exercise that power. Whitney trying to find a TV that doesn't connect to the internet, she's probably in a vast minority. So there's not that much power there because we're not at that point with education yet. But there is a lot of power behind organizational consumers. So for example, if you have some of the really, really big healthcare providers, like Mayo Clinics, for example, if they were to go to their medical device vendors and say, hey, these are the things that we require if we're going to continue being a customer, that has a lot of power. And at that point, the medical device manufacturers are going to basically go, well, we should probably do something about this, or we're going to lose business. And the same applies really in any sector. It's not medical specific. So if you had any of the big box vendors who sell a lot of this stuff, get together and turn around to the manufacturers and say the same thing, we're not going to put you in our stores unless you do these 3 or 4 or 5 things. Or if they went to their big box vendors and said, we're going to now have in store a new rating system, and it's going to have little check marks where your product is available, saying that your product is patchable and your product uses encryption, or whatever the standards are that they have. And if you don't meet these things, that's going to be very apparent to consumers when they're buying. These things have power. They will charge a behavioral change. And that same rationale is actually behind a bill that is being discussed at the moment in the Senate. The people behind the bill are Senators Warner and Gardner. And the way that the bill works is trying to get at the issue of IoT security. And the way it's doing that is it's looking at government procurement specifically. So rather than trying to regulate IoT manufacturers, it's regulating the way that the government buys technology. And it's saying to the government, hey, when you go to buy, here's some things you should think about and you should require from your vendors, because the government spends a shit ton of money. And so if they say, hey, we need these things, that will create behavioral change in people who want to sell to them, and that benefit then trickles down through to everybody else who buys those technologies.
Fantastic. And certainly an idea that's also raised in the Commerce Report on distributed automated tax. But we are running out of time, but I want to make sure that since we have lawyers here, we need to talk about how they're ruining America. And so what about liability as an option? Can that help? All right, we've got the scatting dinosaur in the front, yes?
I think lawsuits are an effective tool to a certain extent. FTC's, lawsuits that they bring against companies drive policies and procedures and start requiring companies to think about these problems, because the reality is if you get a letter from the FTC that turns into a full-blown lawsuit, it's a very, very expensive thing to be dealing with, as well as a massive PR problem. And so I think, they serve as a tool to kind of deter other people from making similar mistakes.
At the same time, I'm just going to hop on in here. They
Steal her
ain't going to
points.
fix everything. This is really hard for consumers. If we look at using product liability on software, right now it's not causing physical harm, and so you don't necessarily have standing to come in. We really do not want to depress innovation in this country. We've got a lot of really cool Bluetooth bacon to spread out further in the world. And if we have companies finding that they are getting product liability lawsuits filed against them anytime they patch a bug, they're not going to patch things. It's a really bad set of incentives. So it's not that product liability is not ever going to help us. It's just not the solution in the way that we think it might be right now.
All right, we are running out of time. The scores are tied dead even. So before we get into the audience, we have one last question here, which is what can we, as the hacker elite, do to help fix these problems? Yes, Wendy.
We should just all go on Twitter and post a lot of lol, fail.
Done.
All right. Mockery.
I think I already said it. I'm just going to repeat it. That I think everybody in this room has power to help with this problem. You can help by educating the organization you work in. You can help by educating manufacturers. You can help by educating regulators, policymakers, consumers, your family, your friends. It is that's really what we need more than anything. Is we need a constant level of increased awareness and knowledge around this. And as people who see the matrix, you can help others see it, hopefully.
Fantastic.
Woo! Woo!
The ghost of dinosaurs past. Yes, you have a...
Open standards. I think open standards, things like OpenSSL, yes, when there are problems that affect us all. But if we start providing open source standards that are low cost, easy to implement, I think more device manufacturers are going to be willing to incorporate with those. And I think that can make some really, really positive change, because, a lot of these IoT devices, it's like SQL issues. Anyways, you can defeat a lot of the low-hanging fruit if you start creating standards that people buy into.
Fantastic. So as we look across the scores, I see that the audience has not yet scored a single point.
Boo.
So shame on you, but this is a chance to, while we just have a few minutes left, actually have you guys weigh in a little bit on what you think this might look like. And I've got a mic for you here.
So on the labeling and stores and consumer-focused thing, since lawyers ruin everything, and we all know this, isn't that going to be just antitrust immediately? Isn't Home Depot almost inevitably going to collude with Philips and make, security certified Hue light bulbs that only happen to pay us $20 million for the privilege of certification?
I mean, I think that's where the government can come in creating a framework that regulates that sort of thing. But I think we've successfully seen labeling work in other areas. It's not that different to food labeling. And you work that out, and supermarkets will have a health food section, and that's okay. They can do that. They just, they're not going to do it with just one group of vendors that make healthy food. So I think it's doable and it's manageable. I think we actually already have examples of how to do this well.
All right, Maurice.
First off, love the costumes. It's really hard to keep a straight face when you're actually putting out some very serious commentary.
This is what I always
What are you
look like.
saying?
Excuse me.
I dressed down for
Apologies.
this.
You look great too. I'm trying to think of examples where manufacturers have actually put in features and devices and then had to roll them back. And the only thing that I can come to is 3D in TV. This was the last time consumers really kind of spoke with their pocketbooks when it comes to really pushing back on a feature they didn't want. So I'm wondering, do you think we can actually have a market for non-smart TVs, or is this inevitable that we're going to have these chipsets, these capabilities in all devices?
So my IoT light bulbs, one of the features I noticed that they implemented that I really liked, but also hated, was you couldn't use the app unless you updated to the most recent version. They did roll that back at some point. I'm sure they got a lot of complaints because then you can't quickly turn on your lights, right? And if you have to wait for the patch to go, that can be really difficult if you need your lights immediately. So I saw that as one thing they did implement and then roll back, I don't know, maybe a version or two later.
There's also water beds. I mean, other than some of the panelists who I'm sure own one.
Not since I punctured it.
All right, we have time for one last question in the back.
Hey, I heard that Underwriters Laboratories, UL, is thinking about moving into the space, into the cybers. Any thoughts from the panel on could this be successful or not?
They have moved into the space. They are doing things. They have a pretty narrow focus on where they are right now. I think that certification of some kind is inevitable. I think that we're seeing too many moves in that direction for it to like randomly stop. And I think there will be lots of people who want to get in on that business, not just UL. UL is just has a good position to start from. The challenge with it is always going to be like, what areas of technology do you focus on? How do you develop standards that apply and that people think are reasonable? Again, this is where I think that security experts can help by advising on the development of these standards. I think that what the UL is doing is minimally useful in a very focused area.
All right, I think we have time for a very quick two-finger question in the back. Yes.
Has there been cases where a manufacturer actually has been sued for failing to patch?
Well, off the top of my head, it's one of the many factors that are in consideration. So when the FTC initiates an investigation against the company, usually failure to patch is one aspect of a parade of horrors. So yes, one that I can think of off the top of my head was a router case. They knew that it was vulnerable. They knew it was being exploited. Not only did they fail to listen to the coordinated disclosure that they were getting, but they were failing to patch in a reasonable time frame. And when they did patch, they then failed to give notice to consumers that they needed to patch. And that was a big central part of Linksys. That's the name of the case. Yeah, that was a big central part of the FTC's investigation and ultimately resulted in a consent order.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I might be wrong about this, but I think there's an ongoing case in the medical sector at the moment, I think.
So I think we've learned a lot here today on the game show. I think we've learned that IoT security is both important, but a very nuanced issue. Learned that easy regulatory fixes may not be the right way, but there are lots of ongoing industry-led opportunities for people to weigh in with real expertise. And I think we've learned that, yes, Jen can even be creepier when she has a mustache on.
Oh, trust me, I can always be creepier.
So with that, I would like you to join me in thanking our brave contestants. And Jen, do you want to give a quick plug for the policy thing that's happening over the platform?
Right, okay, yes. Public round. So for people who are interested in public policy, there is, BSides this year has donated a room called Public Ground. And people who work in the policy sphere, either in the government or in private sector in some way, like volunteering their time or as an actual professional policy person, they'll be hanging out there and you can just go and talk to them about what's happening in cybersecurity policy, how to get involved, they'll give you advice, all that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, I don't know where the public ground room is yet. We'll just go ahead.
I believe it's over in Platinum. Anyone in an orange shirt will route you there. I'll be there this afternoon from 2 to 4. And I know a number
And
of our
there's some really
panelists will
awesome
be.
people who've signed up. It's today and tomorrow, so that's the place to go if you're interested in public policy.
You can poke at a real live government person.
Yeah.
No, please don't poke.
They
at
are
government people.
humans. They do have feelings.
But do they
If you
bleed?
mock me, do we not weep? All right, everyone, thank you very much again.